Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Women of Golf. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and of course, joining me is one of the hardest working ladies in the golf business, LPGA professional Cindy Miller. Cindy, welcome back.
Thank you, Ted. It's so nice to be here.
I know. It's another Tuesday morning here. We're already in the 10th of June. It's hard to believe this. Another month is just moving along here, and I know you've got a lot of busy stuff on your plate. We got a busy show this morning, so we're going to get right to it. Just before we start, though, real quick, though, don't forget, everybody, that we're live every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here on blogtalkradio.com, and you can just go up into the search key and type in Women of Golf, and you'll get to us on the program. And also, during the live broadcast, any point on Tuesday mornings, if you want to call in and talk to Cindy or I or any of the guests that are on the program, you can do so by calling area code 347-945-5855, or you can email questions or comments, if you'd like, to the program at womenofgolf@gmail.com. We got a really great show. We've been doing a series here. Cindy's brought a really fantastic series over the last several weeks called Own Your Game, and we're already up to part 5. And this is a really great series that she's been doing. But just let me quickly remind you, I've missed a step here. A little bit later in the broadcast, of course, we're going to be joined by LPGA professional Renee Powell, who's going to be joining us here in about a half an hour or so. So make sure you stick with us here and listen to the Own Your Game series that Cindy and I are going to do here in just a minute, and then don't forget to stick around and listen to Renee Powell when she comes on. This particular is actually it's under sort of the umbrella of Own Your Game series that Cindy's been doing, but it's sort of a series within a series, and it's the head game, and it's 8 champion personality traits via golf psych, mind management, and thought control. And this is sort of part 1 of it. Cindy, it's really an important part of the game. And one of the components here, one of the first parts of it is cool, narrow focus. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, there's a physical game, and there's a mental game, a head game, and an emotional game when you're trying to eventually own your whole game. So in this series of the head game, needless to say, I am probably one of the greatest examples of a wacko in the world. And so in my quest to have a mulligan, if you will, on the Legends Tour, I needed to have the courage to look in the mirror and be honest with myself and try to figure out, what's wrong with Cindy and why does she not play better and perform better, and if she could fix something, what would it be? And clearly this was one of the components that needed to be tweaked and continually needs to be tweaked. So within the head game, I have had the privilege of working with the people at Golf Psych, Deborah Graham and John Stabler, and have done a personality assessment and the champion traits assessment from Golf Psych, and they have these 8 champion traits that Deborah Graham has done her PhD on, and she basically did all the research on the LPGA Tour to find out what really makes a great champion. And there are 8 specific traits, and the first one of these is cool and narrow focus. And what cool and narrow focus is the ability to separate yourself from people and circumstances during a round and becoming more internally focused.
Right. And one of the problems that I think that a lot of people have is maintaining that focus during a round. They tend to get too many thoughts cluttering their head, and so obviously that you need to have that ability to sort of narrow your focus, especially at a championship level. A lot of the players, and as you know, playing at a high level, you've got to be able to narrow that focus in order to be able to maintain integrity through the round, correct?
Yes, and again, it would also depend on your personality. So if someone's very talkative and energetic, they might have a very wide focus, like a kid playing, a young junior player, walking and looking at the birds and the butterflies and the squirrels and the alligators and all the things on the golf course, and then the ability to stop, ADD if you would, it would be a wide focus, and to be able to stop and narrow your focus to be on the task at hand, to be able to perform a shot, whereas a narrow-focused person would be thinking and grinding about their round the whole time they're on the golf course. Well, needless to say, a little bit too much of a wide focus or too much of a narrow focus is not a good balance to be able to play 18 holes of golf, which can take up to 4.5 hours. So you need to be able to shift states, if you will, between, talking to your playing partners during a round and noticing the great vegetation and the pretty flowers in spring and then saying, now it's time to hit a shot. What do I do now?
Yeah, exactly. And I think probably, the best example I could give, when you watch a lot of the professionals, obviously they need that narrow focus when they're getting ready to, prepare and execute for their shots at any given time. And really, because there are so many distractions, it's not just that, as you say, the pretty flowers and the vegetation and animals and that might be on the golf course. But when they're playing in a tour event particularly, there's a lot of distractions. You've got distractions from the fans. You've got, television cameras on you and other, noise distractions. So it takes a much more narrow focus in order to prepare for that. Otherwise, it begins chaos. So, some of the recommendations that are in this program for this particular aspect of it is awareness of focus. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, let's go back to what this is. The technique is to narrow your focus would be, let's pretend we're playing at the U.S. Open in Pinehurst this week.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I can remember the last U.S. Open that I ever played in. When you walk up to the first tee, you are going to be very nervous. But you have to be able to control your thoughts and emotion and your attention. And I can remember, again, I think I mentioned this on the program a few weeks ago, the people in the USGA, they're almost scary because I was in Nashville for my last U.S. Open, and it was about 125 degrees, and it was so humid and hot, and I was sweating like a pig, and the people in the USGA committee, had blue sport coats and a long-sleeve shirt, and nobody was sweating, and they announce your name, Cindy Kessler, which was my maiden name, play away, please, and they don't smile, and so you're already nervous, and now this is really making you nervous. And I can remember standing over the ball, and all of a sudden I felt something, and it was like, what is that? And it was the fat on the top of my knees was shaking. And so when I became aware of the fat on the top of my knees shaking, of course, then my thought was, wow, I can't even believe you have fat on the top of your knees, and how scared are you? And I hope to God I hit this ball straight. And then needless to say, it was like, okay, we are not paying attention to what we're doing here. You need to back away and start this over again. And I did, and I have no idea. I don't even remember hitting the ball, but it did go down the middle of the fairway, thankfully. But when you might even liken it to something like when you're watching TV in a room full of noisy people, can you focus on what's on TV? Can you pay attention to what's going on TV and kind of blank out everybody else in the room? And that's what these players the next 2 weeks in the U.S. Open at Pinehurst are going to have to be able to do. They're going to have to make sure that they keep their attention on the task at hand of what they have to do rather than all the people lining the fairway or the TV cameras or, holy cow, this is a big deal. This is my, whatever U.S. Open, and I need to make sure that I play well. So it's really the ability to mentally prepare and pay attention to what you're doing.
Exactly, and because there are so many distractions, even for the amateur player, there's other people on the golf course, maybe the adjacent hole, and you've got sometimes errant shots that have happened, and now they're sort of encroaching on your fairway. So there's a lot of distractions even for the amateur player. So it takes, people always assume that, well, I just need to be able to hit the ball better, and I need to be able to putt better, and those are certainly, the physical part of the game is certainly important. But I think the emotional and the mental part of golf is equally, if not more important, because you can be a decent ball striker and be able to hit, even if you only hit 150 yards straight. But if the mental side is not equally as tough, that can make or break a round.
Oh, absolutely. And again, we've been doing a lot of playing lessons recently in the spring in Buffalo, trying to get people ready for the season. And it's amazing to me how much my students and athletes and amateurs really don't pay attention to what's going on around them. Following your golf ball is a big deal. And beginners, of course, we have to give them a little slack because they don't know what to do, but that's the purpose of the playing lesson, to say, okay, you need to be aware of where everybody is. Don't do a practice swing when anybody's going to get hit. Follow your golf ball. Mark it with something out on the golf course, a tree or, a corner of a bunker or something, but pay attention to what's going on. The other thing with this tool and narrow focus is being able to tune out irrelevant internal thoughts while you're playing.
Right.
I stood over a shot, and all of a sudden I hear a voice that says, don't hit it in the bunker. And I'm like, wow, who's that talking to me? And it's the enemy, the protector, trying to be sure that I do the right thing. So you have to practice being able to know what you're thinking when you're thinking it, and being able to be the right voice in your head at the right time. Because if you're not telling if you're not in control of your thoughts, there will be, your subconscious mind will start talking to you.
Yeah.
And typically it's not a good thing.
No, because, obviously as people become more developed in their mental thought process, they're able to tune those out. And that's why some of the people at the top level of whatever sports, whether it be golf or other sports, are able to do that so successfully because, and that doesn't mean that they don't occasionally slip, but they've over time have developed that skill to be able to focus, and keep a narrow focus when they need to. It's just like we've said all the way along, it's through practice. You not only have to practice the physical side of the game, but you also have to practice the mental side of the game. And there's a lot of times that you can do that away from the golf course when you're doing other activities. There's ways of just keeping yourself focused on a task at hand or something else that you might be doing. And that's good practice even for playing golf.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing is that you need to be able to turn your mind away from the game between shots so that your mind can have a rest. You can't grind for 4 hours. So It's funny, in fact, the last time I think the Open was at Pinehurst, it was at Pine Needles. And there was a story that I heard Lynn Marriott and Pia Nelson tell me to a group of LPGA professionals that the last time that Annika won the U.S. Open at Pinehurst, before she was ready to tee off, maybe, 10 minutes before, she told her caddy, I need to talk to Lynn or Pia, get them over here. And they were already walking down the fairway preparing to watch her round. And her caddy ran and grabbed Lynn and said, Annika needs to talk to you. She walked back up on the practice green, and Annika said, I can't play today. And Lynn said, well, what do you mean you can't play today? She goes, I just can't do this. I'm scared to death. I just cannot play today. And she goes, well, Annika, you have to play today. You're leading the U.S. Open. You absolutely have to play. I can't do it. I'm too afraid. She goes, well, let's think about this for a minute. She goes, look up in the sky. She goes, can you see the moon up there? And Annika said, yeah. And she said, well, if you were way up high on the moon and people were up there looking down, do you think anybody really cares what's going on in your life today?
Right.
And she said, well, probably not. And she said, well, how long does your pre-shot routine take? And she said, 35 seconds, 30 to 35 seconds. And she goes, well, what's your scoring average? Well, it's 70. She says, well, you're going to be out there for 4 hours today. And how much time and energy do you really have to focus and think about a shot if your scoring average is 70 and your pre-shot routine takes 30 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, probably only 30 minutes. She goes, well, let's figure out where you're going to go on vacation for the other 3.5 hours. She said, you're building a new house down in Orlando, right? Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? You love to cook. Are you going to redo the kitchen? Oh, my God, yeah, I'm going to make the kitchen amazing. She goes, well, in between shots, why don't you go on vacation and figure out what you're going to do with your kitchen and what kind of meals you're going to cook in your new house? Do you think you can do that? She says, yeah, I can do that. She goes, okay, so that's the plan for the day. You only have to focus and concentrate for 30 seconds, and you're only going to have to do that for 30 minutes, but the other 3.5 hours you're going on vacation. She said, okay. And she went out and won the U.S. Open. Now, what a great story. I mean, to me, that changed my golf life because I thought, wow, if Annika Sorenstam can be nervous and not want to play, hi, I'm with you, you know, a fear of failure, doesn't want to look stupid, embarrassed. So needless to say, that's the perfect recommendation I would give to someone about your awareness of focus of, you know, how do I take little mental vacations while I'm out there playing?
Yeah, exactly. That is a fantastic story, and you know, really when you think about it, you know, we all have watched Annika play over the years, and you know, from the outside, you would have never suspected that even somebody at her caliber and her skill level would ever be faced with the same types of fears and challenges that, you know, the average person will. But it's true. It doesn't matter how good of a player you are. And this just goes to prove what I was saying earlier. You know, it's great to have a great physical game, but mentally we're all really at the same disadvantage. At any time, you know, fears and doubt and self-awareness creep in and can sabotage even somebody at the highest level. So what a great story. I like that. I'm going to make a note of that, and that's something that I think is great to pass on to students and things like that. But Cindy, there's a few quick points here I just want for us to touch upon, just some of the things that's under some of the recommendations, and I'll just read them off here quick, and maybe we can just sort of you can just sort of briefly capture on each one. The first one I mentioned, awareness of focus. There's social skills. You know, mental routine, thought checks. Just talk very quickly, if you can, or briefly about each of those and the importance of helping in the narrow, keeping a narrow focus.
Well, again, we're looking for a balance between a wide and a narrow focus. Social skills, you know, do you communicate with your playing partners? Some people absolutely will not talk to anybody while they're playing, especially in tournaments. Because I think they're afraid to widen their focus, that it might distract them and they won't have the ability to narrow it when the time comes to hit a shot. But, you know, you got to make at least some effort to be friendly and interested in others, especially off the course, but even to some degree between shots. I've been told by people that I'm really fun to play with, and I believe that, you know, I talk, but I don't talk too much. And again, the like personality assessment, it measures where great champions sit within this line from 0 to 10, and in their ability to, with cool and narrow focus, it should be between a 3 and a 4 out of a 10. 10 being, you know, hi, how are you, and talking too much and not paying any attention to anybody, you know, anything that's going on. And then 0 or 1 being, you know, I don't talk to anybody. I'm always focused on what I'm supposed to do. So if you sit between the 3 and 4 range, you have the ability to shift states and turn it on and turn it off. Do you say good shot with people, and then are you able to stop and focus on what you're doing? So you want to be careful that you don't widen your focus to the point you can't narrow it again for your next shot, but you do have to have the ability to stay a little bit social while you're out there. On the other hand, the women's, everybody complains about Ladies' Day, that they're just out there trying to have fun, and they may not be able to narrow their focus at all. And I'm not trying to throw women under the bus, but, a lot of times you'll hear students say, well, I don't want to play with the 18-holers. They mean business. Well, that's because they're narrowing their focus because their motivation is to play a better game rather than they're motivated just to be out there socially.
Right, and that goes to, what you really talked about at the very beginning of the series is really first sort of discovering what it is that you want from the game, whether you just want to be sort of a social golfer or whether you want to be somebody that's looking to improve their game and, to either play at a competitive level, whether it be on a tour or in a corporate event. So once you sort of understand, where you want to fit in this game, then it sort of goes from there. So, some people, that's all they want. It's a social thing. That's all it is. They go out, they play golf. They're not really caring so much about improving per se. And then there's others, of course, that are a little bit, as you said, more narrow focused in their game because they do want to improve and they're more, have a more goal-oriented process, if you will. But, and also, you talk about mental routine and things like that. Developing a strong mental routine will help to keep, you focus under stressful circumstances. And you've had to do that throughout your whole career, right?
Right. Well, and again, we've talked about this the last couple of weeks. What is it that you do? Do you have a pattern that you follow each time you get ready to hit a shot? I tend to tap myself on my leg to say, okay, it's an anchor to me, and an anchor is something that reminds you of what you're doing in your brain that goes back to, now we're going to start this. So if you watch this week on the U.S. Open, you will see players have different idiosyncrasies and things that they do in their pre-shot routine. Somebody that's very noticeable is Keegan Bradley. I mean, he fidgets and thinks, and you could see him and spot him 3 holes away by his mannerisms of what he does, but he does that same routine every single time on every single shot. So the ability to narrow his focus, I'm sure he has an anchor, and maybe we should try to watch and see what does he do when he starts to shift states and focus on the task at hand. Every tour player around, men and women, have some type of idiosyncrasy, mannerism that they do that says, okay, now it's time to move. Now I'm shifting states. I'm going to go from being friendly to walking down the fairway to talking to the crowd to, okay, it's time to pay attention and hit the shot. So you definitely need a strong mental routine. If you don't have one, it will be more difficult to narrow your focus and pay attention to the task at hand.
Right, and you also talked about, in your explanation about thought checks and developing an awareness of your thoughts in between the shots. As you indicated with your story of Annika Sorenstam being able to, give yourself a mental break between shots to take the pressure off and just, in her case, it was, getting ready to do some renovations on her home and taking a mental vacation, if you will. So you've got to be able to balance that out, and you can't just all be, focused as you indicated on the shot at hand. Otherwise, that's a very difficult thing to do for 4.5 hours in a round.
Absolutely. Definitely it is. And or, what am I shooting? Adding up your score. It's too much grinding on things that you really can't control. So if you can, and I'm guilty of that. I would tend to grind my way around the golf course, and I really need to, go look at the flowers and think different thoughts. When I caddied for Alan on the PGA Tour, I was never allowed to say, okay, let's go make birdie. I was always allowed to talk about the kids or where are we going for dinner, just something that had absolutely nothing to do with golf, just to take your mind off of the game.
Yeah, and that's true. You know, there's a lot of things, and that's something that I think that would be great to explore at some point. We're going to work on that, but I would love to, you know, for us to get a caddy on the program at some point and talk about some of the things that go on between a caddy and a player. I think that would be very interesting to explore. Because it's not just a matter of tending to the pin and carrying the bag around the golf course. There's a lot more to that relationship that I don't think the average person understands. I think that would make for an interesting segment on the show. So we'll have to look into that and maybe make that happen. But Cindy, there's a lot of other components to this, and we're getting close to time to have Renee come on. So, but the next one in line, and we're not going to unfortunately have time to get to it today, but is abstract thinking. And we're going to talk a little bit about that on next week's program. And then there's, following that over the next few weeks, under the head game, Cindy's going to be bringing us some other segments to this as well, emotionally stable, dominant, tough-minded, self-assured, and self-sufficient, arousal, and or tension. So those are going to be some of the topics under the head game that are part of that series, the 8 champion personality traits that you got via Golf Psych. So we're going to talk about those each week that all sort of fall into the head game part of owning your game.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am too. You know, this is a part really, I don't think that most average golfers really truly understand how important it is. I mean, most people think, well, I'm not playing on the PGA or LPGA tour, so, or what have you, so I don't need to be that serious. But really, it's not about being serious. It's about concentration and about understanding what thought process should be going through your mind when you're playing a round, because both good and bad, both as you said, the narrow focus and a wider focus. Because I think once people get control of their thoughts, the rest sort of falls into place. I mean, with a little practice, you can be a better ball striker. But the mental side or the head part of the game is something that takes a little bit more ability. And, having this information that you're bringing to us, Cindy, is fantastic, because it'll help break it down and help people to understand what they need to do to play better golf.
Well, and here's the biggest deal of all is the fact that I think most amateurs believe that golf pros and professional tour players don't deal with any of this, when in fact they do. We all have the same issues, but they have learned how to deal with it. So it's not that they don't have these issues. They do have these issues, just like the person who can't break 100, but they have been willing to look in the mirror and find solutions to these challenges so that they can perform better.
Right, exactly. Well, Cindy, thank you for, this is just a out of the park series that you've been doing here the last several weeks, and I know it's going to help a lot of golfers out there, and I appreciate you, wanting to do this. I think it's important, and it's something that everybody can benefit from. But with that in mind, Cindy, if you want to do the honors, I believe we have Renee sitting here patiently waiting to come on the program.
Well, I have known Renee for I don't know how long, probably 30 years. I met her. Well, I was going to say 40, but I stopped. 30 years, I would think. I met Renee when I was playing on the LPGA Tour, and she has the greatest smile in the world and the biggest heart. And not only that, but she comes from a family of perseverers, as do I, and we have that common thread of never, ever, ever, ever giving up. And yesterday I had the opportunity to help Renee make some extra money for the Clearview Legacy Foundation for research, education, and preservation of her charitable foundation, and the Clearview Hope for Women's Veterans. And the best story of all is her dad is the only African-American who built his own golf course by his own hands, owns it, runs it, and now she and her brother Larry do it in Canton, Ohio, and she is just she's a wonderful woman, and I am honored and thrilled that she's on with us. Welcome to Renee Powell.
Thank you very much, and I'm so happy to be with both of you.
Well,
and
thank
Cindy,
you, Renee.
Cindy, you're amazing. Cindy got back to Buffalo, and here we are.
Yeah,
exactly.
We were talking. Yeah, we were talking just before we went live on air a little earlier, and I said to Cindy, Cindy, how do you do it? I mean, you're hopping every week. You're somewhere else and doing all this. And I said, how do you keep such a busy schedule? And I think she just answered that eloquently. She's a hard worker, much as you are, Renee, and just wants to help grow this game, and she's doing a fantastic job. Renee, if you wouldn't mind, just for some of those out there that may not be as familiar with Renee Powell, just tell them a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this great game.
Well, I grew up, as Cindy had mentioned, my dad actually designed and built Clearview Golf Club back in 1946, just shortly after he came back from World War II. And so he felt that golf was he fell in love with the game of golf when he was 9, felt that everybody in the world should play golf. He loved it. He had a passion for it. And so at the age of 3, he put a golf club in my hand, and I started really getting a little bit more serious with it when I was about 10. And, everything progressed. Played junior tournaments, collegiate golf, amateur golf, and then eventually went on the LPGA Tour. So golf has been a passion for our entire family. My dad took us all to play. He was my only instructor ever. So golf is just, it's my career, it's my life, it's my love.
Yeah, and the one thing about all golfers sort of have the same, a similar story, and it's just that it's one of these things, and I think this is why it's so important with these junior programs now. I think if we get a lot of the youngsters involved, and once they've sort of been bitten by that golf bug, it's a game really for life. I don't know of too many people that, once they've been bitten by that bug, they might put the clubs down for a little while here and there, but it always seems to resurface. So that's fantastic. Renee, we certainly wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Clearview Legacy Foundation that Cindy had mentioned just a moment ago. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that got started and what the purpose of the foundation?
Well, actually, in 2001, Clearview was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, so it's now a National Historic Site. We also, in that same year, for the preservation and for the growth and everything, created the Clearview Legacy Foundation for Education, Preservation, and Research. And from an educational standpoint, we do a lot of various programs, getting people and individuals in the game of golf that would not have otherwise played the game or thought that they could play the game. Women, youth, seniors. I do a program for individuals that have dementia and a little bit of Alzheimer's. So I do that program, during the summertime. I do a program for Special Olympics. So those are some of the things that we do. And also, we'll talk a little bit about our Clearview Hope Women Veterans Program. But that's sort of from the educational standpoint. From a preservation standpoint, Clearview is a one-of-a-kind golf course. As having been, like Cindy said, my dad actually built the first 9 holes by hand. And he really sort of looked at. He was in World War II in Scotland and England, and sort of had visions and ideas from there because he didn't have money to move soil and mountains and things. So he used all the natural elements just like they do in overseas in the UK. And then, so from a preservation standpoint, Clearview is so important. It was a course that is part of American history. Sunday night, we had the assistant director of the museum, Susan Wasser, of the USGA Museum here, and they have actually created a new exhibit, and the focal point of the exhibit is Clearview and my father. So it's preserving. They were here to collect a lot of archival items in the fall of last year. So the USGA realizes the significance of it. And actually there are 2 huge banners hanging outside the USGA Museum. Each one has a picture of my dad on it. And then the World Golf Hall of Fame has just opened up a permanent exhibit, their newest permanent exhibit, called Honoring the Legacy, A History to African Americans in Golf. Because a lot of things have been, over the years, my sport has been a little bit funny. There was a lot of, prejudice and racism in the game of golf.
Sure.
And so my dad was one of those people who was a real barrier breaker and a real pioneer. And just like many people wouldn't know that the person who invented the golf tee was a black man. Well, the first American-born golf professional was a black man. So
he was a dentist. He was a dentist, I believe, wasn't he? Wasn't the gentleman that
you're
invented?
Absolutely right, dentist.
Yep.
Yes, he was Dr. George Grant.
Yep.
So Clearview then holds a special place also in the industry and in American history. So from a preservation standpoint, it's very important that the legacy of what was created by my mom and my dad continues. We'll be celebrating 70 years in a couple of years, in the year 2016 of Clearview. So which is pretty significant when it comes to research and turfgrass research, because of the fact that my dad didn't have the dollars to do certain things of what people would normally do on a golf course. He had to be creative and find ways of trying to keep grass green longer, of using different say, fertilizers to do things. And one of the things was, it was just, and then he sort of passed that on to my brother. And the things that you would think that we had, 20 people working on the golf course with all the things that he's able to get done and the things that ways that he's created various things here, growing grasses and into established grasses, and sort of changing the greens over as Larry has done, making them a little faster over the years. But so they've created a lot of things in research, working with a course that people just don't know, and simply because of a need with lack of dollars, lack of financing.
Right. I know I had, back a few months ago, I obviously have another program called Golf Talk Live, and I actually had on as a guest Peggy Rhodes, the daughter of late Teddy Rhodes.
Oh, yes.
And I had also had Pete McDaniels on, the author of Uneven Lies, and we talked about a lot of the different contributions that have been made over the years to the golf industry by African Americans. And there was a lot of things, as you indicated. You talked about the first, the actual tee was developed by a dentist, and a lot of other things. So there were a lot of headrows, a lot of things that most people don't understand and don't realize some of the great contributions that have made over the years. And there's a myriad of golfers that have contributed long before Tiger Woods hit the scene, such as Lee Elder and Charlie Sifford and many, many others. And, of course, your father have contributed to the golf industry. So I'm very glad that you were on here. Let's talk about, you mentioned about the Clearview Hope Women Veterans Program. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, several years ago, actually back in 2019, or 2011, one of my friends with PGA of America had said something to me about the fact that there were a lot of programs for veterans, but really nothing for women veterans. And so he sort of talked to me about creating a program, in golf, and reminding me that my father had been a World War II veteran, that I had gone to Vietnam during the war as part of a USO tour. And so I thought about it, looked at it, and one of the things he said is, he says, he'd come up with the name Hope, helping our patriots everywhere. But he says, why don't you call it Clearview Hope? And I said, okay, I can do that. And how does this get funded? He goes, well, it should be a program for women veterans at no cost to them, and you're going to have to find the way of raising the dollars yourself. I said, what? So it became a challenge for me, and he was right. I'd done Vietnam, so my dad as a veteran, and I sought out to find women veterans, and I'll tell you that was the very hardest part of it all, because as women come back from, maybe some have served in wartime or peacetime, no matter what, they sort of go back and blend into the walls, so to speak. And so, I mean, I called various commissions and things, could not find women veterans. I had one woman who I had given golf lessons to, and I said, and she was a pupil of mine, and I said, look, I said, Hollis, you're a veteran. I said, I told her about the program. And then I was doing another program with a 3-hole ladies league, and I had met each person, and I then said, well, I'm starting this women veterans program. Does anybody know any women veterans? And the last 2 ladies raised their hand and said, we're veterans. I'm like, really? Well, perfect. You're going to be in the program. And so they became my first 3 people, and I said, look, we need to grow this, and how do we do it? And so it's become one by one. We now have nearly 60 women in our program from the Vietnam era all the way to Afghanistan. We have a couple of women that are dealing with their Purple Heart recipients, one totally blind lady, another one who's very visually impaired, and a number of women that are dealing with PTSD, and others that are really good support for all. And so it's just been growing word of mouth.
Yeah. And that's the really the best way, I think. A lot of times, I mean, you can do a lot of advertising and spend a great deal of resources in doing that. But I think the best way for any whether it be a foundation or a program such as this is by word of mouth, because once somebody has been exposed to that and understands what it is that you're doing and sees the benefits and how it's helping some great ladies that have given time and service to their country, it just takes off like wildfire. Like you said, you started with just a handful, and now you're up to 60 involved in the program and growing still.
Right. And I will say this, one of the companies that's really come forward that's been really helpful has been Club Corps. And so we do a kickoff luncheon up at in the Saturday before Memorial Day at Firestone Country Club, and then we do a year-round program here. I come back. We kicked off. Actually, last Friday was our first outdoor program because the weather's sort of gotten a little bit better. But so it goes year-round, and it costs absolutely nothing for our women veterans. We had women veterans at our dinner on Sunday night, and they thoroughly enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Cindy, I wanted to ask you, if I might, you indicated when you were bringing Renee on the program that you've known her for, I won't use that 30-year or 40-year word again, but you've known her for a long time. What are some of the things that really impressed you about Renee in all the years that you've known her?
Her heart to give. Her heart, her willingness to work really hard. She's selfless. And I'm just listening to what she's doing with the women veterans, and I had the opportunity to play with some of them yesterday and be around them on Sunday and Monday. And it goes to show that if you really care about something, that you can choose to pursue. And look at what this woman has done with what her father started. I mean, it's just amazing to me. And I think she can teach us all a little lesson of dream bigger and open up your heart and see who you might be able to help. So I thank you, Renee, because you're amazing.
Oh, thank you, Cindy.
I think one of the things, and you've both really hit it right on the head. I think one of the things in life, and Cindy, you and I have talked about this on the program before, golf certainly mimics life in so many ways. There's so many challenges that we faced in life and of course, challenges that we face, in and off the golf course. But I think one of the things that if you are selfless and you focus on doing great things for others, the rewards are so much better than if you focus it internally on yourself. And this is just a great way, Renee, that you've sort of sought the challenge to help others out there that have had some struggles, in their lives, whether it's of their own doing or from, being part of the service. You obviously have some different events, I'm assuming, going on throughout the year that help contribute both to the foundation and also for the program. Tell us a little bit about that and when they take place, and maybe we'll see if we can help spread the word a little bit for you.
Oh, great. Our annual program that we just had yesterday, but also we're doing a program, an event, a one-day event on July the 5th, I think it is, on Saturday after the 4th of July. And what it is, it's called the Historic Links Along the Lincoln Highway, because we're a historic link. We're right along the Lincoln Highway, which is also an historic highway. And then in August, on August 23rd, we have another major fundraiser, which is the 30th anniversary for this, and it's renamed the William Powell Clearview Legacy Foundation Celebrity Golf Tournament. And the format is 4 amateurs paired with 1 celebrity athlete. A lot of football players, some former basketball players, baseball, and it's a really fun event. Actually, Leroy Kelly, who played for the Cleveland Browns and is a Hall of Famer, has been here every single year, which we've done it for 29 years so far. So Leroy has he's been with us all that time. He comes in from Philadelphia to play in the event, and he brings in with him several of his friends that he grew up with from high school and in the neighborhood, and they all come and they're a part of the event. I think this year Alonzo Mourning said that he was going to come. And then we have people like Paul Warford, mostly Cleveland Browns. I know you guys are up in the Buffalo Bills area. We have a lot of Cleveland Browns, and then of course, as Franco Harris was here yesterday, he's involved with the various things that we do and supports our events. So those are the 2 main things that we're doing coming up, and then we have some other, just other various programs that take place too.
Renee, if I could ask you to do me a favor at some point in the next few days, if you wouldn't mind emailing me a little more on the particulars of the dates again, and that I'll be certainly more than happy to plug them on my my regular program as well, and just give you some great promotion and circulate it through my social networks and that. I wanted to ask you a question, if just a little bit off, certainly on the golf topic, but as you may be aware, Cindy has been bringing a great series to the program here the last several weeks called Own Your Game. And I'd like to sort of pick your brains, if I could, a little bit. What sort of defines, or how did you sort of come about to own your game when it came to golf? What were some of the things that helped you to own your game, whether it was somebody that was a great influence, or was it just your own sort of self-motivation? What helped you to own your game?
Well, my parents, my dad was, as I said, was the person that got me into the game of golf. And I know, when your parents are working with you, my dad being my teacher, and at certain stages in your life, I think a lot of kids go through a little rebellious stage. And I thought, my God, my dad is making me practice so much, And so and one day he came to me, he says, well, we can sell your golf clubs. You don't have to play. And I went to bed that night, and I think I was right around 14 years old. I went to bed, and I thought, he said he's going to sell my golf clubs? I love this game. I think that's when I began to own my own game. But because he really, I guess, knew ways of motivating me to bring out the best in me, and he knew, he knew where my talents lied. And he was, instructing me, but he knew I had, everybody has talents and abilities, and a lot of mine were directed towards golf, and I then realized that I loved the game, and I was going to work hard at it myself, and it wasn't going to be anybody who was going to push me to do it, but I was going to push myself.
Right, and I think that's so important, and the reason I wanted to ask that is, as I said, Cindy's been bringing this series to the program here the last several weeks, and we just had a great segment earlier just before you came on. It's sort of a series within a series, and focusing on the head game, really about what goes on inside and how we have to sort of narrow our focus and things like that. How were you able, when you were playing, more competitively, what helped you to narrow your focus? What thought process when you were going through a round?
Well, I think that realizing that, if you hit a bad shot out there, it's history. You have to be able to bring everything back to the present time, and you can't give up. I remember Carol Mann once said, you don't give up until you pick the ball out of the hole on the 18th hole. And that's so true. You just you're out there, you keep grinding, and you try to stay centered, you try to stay focused, and not get too high or get too low. It's a game that it is such a mental game. And you just, like everybody hits bad shots, but you have to learn to let it go, and you have to learn to realize that shot that you hit, or even what we've just said, is never going to be relived again. So you've got to remain in the present and then continue with the next shot, one shot at a time. And I think a lot of times what happens, especially with amateurs, they're thinking so far ahead, or they're saying, well, if I have this score in this hole, wow, it's going to be my best score ever. And they're thinking ahead instead of on the one shot that they're on at a time. And it's sort of one shot at a time. But like I say, it's to stay focused, to work hard out there for those 4.5 hours that you're in the golf course, and because you have control over what that outcome is. Mm-hmm. And so it's just really, I think, staying as positive as you can, and realizing that, if you hit it there, you have a club to get it out of wherever it is.
Right, exactly. And if not, then you just sort of, like you say, it's in the past, and then you move forward from there. Renee, just one sort of final thing as we get close to wrapping up here. If you had a young, fresh student in front of you that's never played the game, but maybe had a desire or passion, what advice would you give them? Maybe they have an aspiration to become a professional player at some point. What advice would you have to give them to start out and how they should proceed from there?
Well, the first thing is always, as we're talking about, get lessons and working with somebody that you can work with. Work on one short game. We watch tournaments on television, and everybody, if you think about it, the game is lost or won, on that short game, on the putting green, chipping, and that's where you're going to build up confidence. And getting them, to understand, I think that, it's not just hitting the ball, swinging out in the practice range and hitting it, but it's also working really on the very short part of the game, because that's going to give you confidence. And I think, again, never giving up and setting goals for yourself, because if you don't set goals, then, you don't know where you're going to stand that next day, that next week, that next month, that next year. And then working towards those things. And, golf today is so wonderful, especially for women and young girls. There are scholarships. When I went to college, there were no scholarships for females. And and so, and also, once they start playing golf, I think competition is important. And the more you're able to compete, the more relaxed you become, too. And I think that's a really good thing. But I would always start people off, understanding the basic fundamentals of the game of golf and where they work from the short game, then going on to the long game. But also realizing that the head part of it, too.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's been a lot of, in my opinion, too much focus on the long game, especially in the men's arena in the last several years. And yet, if you look at most tournaments, the game is either won or lost on the putting surface. So it kind of throws that theory out the window. If the listeners want to get more information, both on obviously the Clearview Golf Club, but also on your foundation and the Clearview Hope Women's Veterans Program, where can they get that information, Renee?
Well, they can go to our website, which is www.clearview-gc.com. And then we're on Facebook, on Clearview Legacy Foundation. I'll give you our email address is CV, like Clearview, 46 at AOL.com. And we can also be reached at area code 330-488-0404. So that's basically all that contact information. They can reach us at any of those. And I it's certainly love to hear from people that are really interested in knowing more about Clearview, and those that are interested in making any kind of contributions to the Clearview Legacy Foundation.
Well, we will certainly help to spread the word. And Cindy, any final thoughts or comments you want to make?
Renee, I asked this question yesterday to the LPGA Tour players and to Kathy Whitworth, and now I ask you, what is the greatest lesson that this game has ever taught you?
Wow. That's a good question. It has, the greatest lesson this game has taught me, I think one of the things is we get so much out of this game. And my whole thing is I think it's very important to give back because we've learned so much. We've met so many incredible people around the world. I could not have been in another career or another business where I would have gained as much as I've gained from playing the sport of golf. And one of the things that my parents always taught was that you have to give back to society to make the world a better world. And I think I've been blessed knowing this game, playing this game, being able to do just that.
Awesome. Awesome.
Great, great comment, and so very true. And I think it goes to what we talked about earlier. I think that when you are able to help others in some capacity, the rewards are far greater than doing things solely for yourself. And Renee, you certainly have done a great job with both the foundation and also helping some of the women's veterans out there that have, as I said, have helped and do a wonderful service for their country. And we thank you for that. And Cindy, I think we need to, I'm going to let you do the honors since you've known Renee for a long time, so we can close out the program.
Renee, I thank you so much for being here. I thank you for everything that you do. You are a blessing to very, very many people, and I am thrilled and honored to know you. And, again, I thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being on the show with us today. And I hope you continue to raise all the money for the Clearview Legacy Foundation and the Women's Clearview Hope Veterans Program. And, again, thank you.
Well, Cindy, and I want to say this to you. You too are a very amazing person because I cannot believe all the things that you do and all the places that you are. So it's great to be able to call you a friend.
Well, thank you.
So
well, thank you, Renee. Again, thank you for joining us, and you're certainly welcome to come back here and visit us anytime you wish.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. You have a great day and a great rest of your week.
Okay, you guys.
All right. Thank you, Renee.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Just in the last moment or two, as I said, Cindy and I are going to be Cindy's going to be bringing the next segment, if you will, and part of the Own Your Game series. But that series, within the series under the head game, next week we're going to be talking about abstract thinking. And over the next several weeks, you want to make sure that you tune in and pick up on that. There's some great information here to help those of you who work on the mental side, if you will, or the head game, and certainly some things to tune into. But in the meantime, we've got to wrap things up here. It's hard to believe another hour has gone by. And Cindy and I would like to thank all of the listeners for tuning into the program, to Women of Golf broadcast each and every week, and we look forward to having you join us here each Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here on blogtalkradio.com. And Cindy, have a fantastic week. Get some rest. You've been hopping around here for the last several weeks, so I hope you're going to get some rest here before you head back out.
I will, and I thank you, Ted.
All right.
If anybody
have
wants
a great
to know
week,
anything more about the head game and the Own Your Game, you can always email me at cindy@cindymillergolf.com.
All right. Sounds good. Cindy, have a great week, and have a great week, everybody, and we will see you here next week at 9 a.m. on the Women of Golf.